Rain fell steady that morning at Ashbrook Correctional Facility, muffling the hum of fluorescent lights and the clatter of metal trays in the kitchen. The air smelled of bleach, frying oil, and something deeper, something rotten. K-9 Officer Mark Riley tugged at Rook's leash as the German shepherd growled low, nose pressed to the warped floorboards under the far corner stove. The guards ignored him at first, chalking it up to a dog's instinct. But Rook didn't budge, not even when Officer Riley tried to pull him away. There was a reason the dog wouldn't leave, and it was something none of them were ready to face. A quiet reminder. If you're enjoying this story, liking and subscribing will help us share more stories like this. The prison kitchen was a different world before sunrise. The clang of steel utensils echoed like gunshots against the tiled walls. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, their cold glow washing the room in pale white. Guards moved with mechanical rhythm, delivering trays of breakfast. Cold oatmeal, burnt toast, powdered eggs. Somewhere beyond the brick walls of Ashbrook Correctional, rain slapped the roof with relentless force. Officer Mark Riley had been here long enough to know that kitchens were both the safest and most dangerous parts of a prison. Safe because it was routine. Dangerous because it had smells, whispers, and opportunity for trouble. He knew every crack in the tile floor. But there was one crack beneath the far stove that today felt different. Rook had been with him for 3 years, a trained German shepherd with a track record of finding contraband and trouble in equal measure. But this morning, Rook's growl wasn't about a hidden stash of drugs or a smuggled phone. This was a deeper sound, a growl that carried dread. Mark tugged at the leash. "Come on, Rook," he said softly. "We got work to do." But Rook planted his paws, his eyes fixed on floorboards. Across the kitchen, Sergeant Carter leaned against the sink, wiping a coffee mug. He glanced over. "That dog acting up again?" he asked, voice low, tinged with annoyance. "It's not acting up," Mark said, voice clipped. "He's focused on something under there." Carter smirked. "Probably a mouse. Or rats. The floor's been rotting for years." But Mark knew the difference. Rook wasn't reacting to a mouse. He was reacting to something else. Something buried. By the time breakfast trays had been served to the inmates, the mood in the kitchen had shifted. A few guards whispered quietly among themselves. Some stole glances toward the stove. A tense energy clung to the air, sharp and heavy. Mark approached the floorboards. He knelt beside Rook, hands brushing the warped wood. It felt unnervingly warm, as though something beneath was breathing. He pressed his fingers harder, hearing a faint scrape. A muffled sound followed, low, human-like. Mark froze. His eyes darted to Carter, who was leaning against the far wall with his arms crossed. Carter met his gaze with something close to indifference. "We'll check it later," Carter said. "We have breakfast duty. Move on." But Mark's gut told him otherwise. Rook's growl deepened, vibrating in his chest. Mark glanced toward the prison gates visible through a narrow kitchen window. Rain blurred the view. Somewhere beyond those gates, Ashbrook carried on an ignorant peace. But inside these walls, something rotten had begun to stir. Mark's radio crackled. "Riley, come in. Status on kitchen patrol." The voice was Officer Daniels, sharp and clipped. "Nothing out of the ordinary," Mark replied, though his voice didn't convince even him. But deep down, he knew Rook wouldn't let this go. He turned toward Carter again. "I'm going to check it. Alone." Carter shook his head. "Not your call. Back to duty." Mark glanced at Rook, who now had his muzzle pressed flat against the floor, tail stiff. That tail flicked once, a warning. Mark's jaw tightened. He didn't argue further. He walked away, leaving Carter to keep his silence. But the knot in Mark's stomach tightened. That afternoon, after the breakfast chaos had settled and the prison kitchen was quieter, Mark returned. Alone this time. He brought with him a crowbar, flashlight, and a stubborn need for answers. Every step closer to that corner of the kitchen was heavy with dread. The smell had changed now, not just bleach and fried eggs, but something acrid, metallic, something buried. Mark's breath was steady, but his pulse was racing. He crouched beside the floorboards, Rook still at his side. The dog's growl was low now, a deep rumble that made Mark's skin crawl. He pried the wood up. Dust and splinters flew. Beneath, there was a small cavity. It smelled like iron and decay. His flashlight revealed something wrapped tightly in old canvas. Mark froze. His fingers trembled. Rook barked once, sharp, urgent. Mark glanced around. No one was watching. Not Carter, not any of the other guards. This was between him, the dog, and whatever lay beneath those boards. He pulled the canvas free. It was a box. Old, weathered, and heavy. He set it on the floor. The air seemed to thicken. A metallic scent rose. Something whispered in the back of his mind, urging him to leave it alone. But Mark couldn't. Not now. He pried open the box. Inside, there was something wrapped in oilskin. Something unmistakably human. A hand, pale, curled, with fingers stiff as bone. Mark staggered back. Rook lunged forward, growling with teeth bared. Somewhere deep in the prison, a cell door slammed shut. Mark realized this was no accident. It was a secret someone buried decades ago, and it was about to come alive again. The corridor beyond the kitchen smelled of damp concrete and stale coffee. Rain still drummed on the roof in a slow, steady beat, a rhythm that felt like a warning. Mark sat on the edge of a battered metal bench in the supply closet, the box lying at his feet. Rook sat beside him, ears pricked, watching every shadow. Mark didn't move. He didn't speak. His knuckles whitened as he stared at the hand in the box. Pale, cold, broken nails. The skin, even in decay, seemed wrong, almost too preserved. He knew what it meant. This was no recent accident. This was deliberate. Somewhere in the prison, something was stirring. The quiet before the storm. Mark's radio crackled again. Riley, kitchen check complete? Carter's voice was measured, but something underlined it. Suspicion. Yeah, Mark said, too quickly. Everything's fine. But Carter didn't buy it. Mark could hear him step closer. Then why are you out here alone? Mark glanced toward the kitchen door. Needed air. Carter paused, then turned away without another word. That silence carried its own weight. Mark knew Carter wasn't just another guard. There was a history here. Carter had been at Ashbrook for over 20 years. He knew the prison's every secret, including the ones nobody talked about. That made him dangerous. Mark shifted his gaze back to the box. Rook growled low again. Mark's gut told him Rook's instincts were right. Something about this was bigger than just a hand buried beneath the floorboards. 2. The search begins. Mark spent the afternoon in the shadows of the supply closet, studying the hand, trying to ignore the pounding in his chest. The air was heavy with dampness, and every sound outside seemed louder. Clanging doors, shouting inmates, the distant hum of machinery. Eventually, he pulled his phone out, something he rarely did in uniform. He snapped a quick picture of the hand. No one needed to know what he'd found yet. He'd figure out first. There was a single name scrawled on the inside flap of the oilskin wrapping. Elias. No last name. No date. Just a name. Mark's thoughts spiraled. Elias was an inmate? A guard? Or something older? From when Ashbrook was just a workhouse, decades before it became a prison? He needed answers. But those answers could get him killed. 3. Secrets in the shadows. Mark returned to the kitchen late that night. Under the cover of darkness, Carter was already there, alone, cleaning utensils. He looked up when Mark entered. "You shouldn't be here," Carter said softly, his voice low enough that Mark had to lean in to hear. "I could say the same to you," Mark replied. Carter studied him for a moment, then nodded toward the floorboards. "You saw it." Mark nodded. Carter's expression hardened. "That hand? That's not the first thing buried under those boards." Mark froze. "What do you mean?" Carter leaned closer, lowering his voice. "There's history here. This place has been covering things up since day one. That floor in the kitchen, it's a grave. Not just one, but more." Mark felt the weight of those words settle over him. The prison was a maze of lies, and he just stumbled into the center of it. "Why?" Mark asked. "Because people inside these walls, guards, inmates, even a warden, have secrets they'll kill to keep buried. And now you've seen too much." Mark glanced at Rook. The dog's low growl was sharper now, almost impatient. Carter glanced at him, too, his eyes narrowing. "You need to walk away, Riley," Carter said, "before they come for you." Mark didn't answer. Instead, he glanced back at the box at the hand. The rain outside beat harder now, rattling the kitchen windows. Somewhere beyond the walls, Ashbrook was breathing, and Mark knew it wasn't just a rain. He wasn't ready to walk away. For the first betrayal. By dawn, Mark was certain Carter had warned someone. The prison was different that morning. The guards moved with a new stiffness. Inmates watched him more closely. Doors slammed louder. Whispers followed him down corridors. At breakfast, Mark tried to act normal, but Rook's behavior made it impossible. The dog stayed glued to his side, growling at certain corners of the kitchen as if sensing eyes on them. Carter approached later, leaning close in the kitchen doorway. "I warned you. This is bigger than you think. They'll bury you with him if you keep poking around." Mark met his gaze. If they buried him here, someone needs to know. Carter's expression darkened. "And if you open that box in the wrong place, you won't live to tell anyone." Mark swallowed hard. Carter was right, but walking away wasn't an option anymore. Not when he'd touched the first piece of something much larger. That afternoon, Mark decided to confront it head-on. He had to know who Elias was, and why his hand was buried beneath the prison kitchen floor. 5. A name that opens doors. Mark started digging into Ashbrook's history. Old prison records, maintenance logs, archived reports. He found a name buried deep in the files. Elias Harrow. Elias Harrow, an inmate who had disappeared 42 years ago. No record of escape. No record of death. Just gone. And buried beneath the kitchen floorboards was proof he hadn't simply vanished. Mark's breath caught. This wasn't just a hidden crime. This was something darker, something institutional. Later that night, he returned to the kitchen with Rook. Carter wasn't there. No one was watching. The air was quiet except for the drip of rain outside and the low rumble of the dog's growl. Mark shone his flashlight into the cavity again. Something shifted beneath the box. Rook stiffened, baring his teeth. Mark froze. Then the sound came, a faint scraping, as if someone moved beneath the floor. Mark swallowed hard. He wasn't sure if it was the rain, the prison settling, or something else entirely. But deep down he knew. They weren't finished burying secrets. And neither was he. The rain had stopped, but Ashbrook Correctional felt heavier than ever. Silence clung to the walls like smoke. Word had spread. Guards looked at Mark differently. Some avoided him. Others watched him with sharp suspicion. Carter didn't approach him all day, and Rook stayed unusually tense. Pacing beside him, ears forward, eyes locked on every shadow. Mark knew something was coming. He just didn't know when. One, the gathering storm. By evening, Mark had pieced together more than just the name Elias Harrow. Elias had been a model prisoner once, a man locked away for petty theft who had ended up as a trusted kitchen worker. His disappearance was the prison's longest-running mystery. No records, no explanations, just silence. And now, beneath the kitchen floorboards, lay proof of something darker, a crime buried so deeply that decades of silence had preserved it. Mark had been warned. Carter's words rang in his ears. "They'll bury you too if you pry too far." But Mark wasn't going to stop. Not now. That night, after lights out, Mark returned to the kitchen with Rook. He carried the box under his arm and a determined weight in his heart. Somewhere in the prison, doors creaked. Somewhere else, footsteps moved silently. Mark found a place deep in the old maintenance tunnels beneath the prison. The air there was colder, damp. The smell of rust and decay clung to every surface. He set the box down, opened it carefully. The hand was inside, wrapped in oilskin. But it wasn't alone. Beneath it was a bundle of papers, yellow with age. Documents, names, dates, and photographs, grainy black and white images of men in guards' uniforms. Men Mark didn't recognize. Men with faces twisted in malice. Mark felt his stomach drop. These weren't just prison records. They were evidence of disappearances, murders, cover-ups, and worse, names he recognized. 2, betrayal. Carter was waiting for him in the tunnels. Mark hadn't heard him approach. "You shouldn't have done this," Carter said quietly, his voice carrying a cold edge. Mark looked up. "Why didn't you tell me? You know it's buried here." Carter's face hardened. "Because if I told you, you'd be dead already. And so would he." Mark frowned. "He?" Carter stepped closer. "Elias Harrow. He was an inmate." "Not exactly. He knew something they didn't want anyone to know, and they killed him for it. Buried him in the kitchen where no one would find him." Mark's hands tightened around the papers. "And the others?" "They all paid the same price," Carter said, his voice low. "And they'll keep paying unless someone stops it." Mark swallowed. Carter was warning him, but also testing him. Was he ally or enemy? Before Mark could answer, footsteps echoed above them. Carter's head snapped up. The sound of heavy boots descended toward the tunnels. They both froze. Rook growled low, and then Carter moved with surprising speed. He shoved Mark toward the far wall. "Go. Now." Mark hesitated. "What about you?" "Go." Carter barked. Mark didn't argue. He ran, clutching the box. Rook followed, teeth bared, growling at unseen shadows. Behind them, Carter stepped toward the approaching guards, alone. Mark didn't look back. 3. The truth unearthed. Mark emerged from the tunnels into the cold night air. Rain had returned, tapping on the stone walls like whispered warnings. Somewhere inside the prison, Carter's voice echoed faintly in his mind. "They'll bury you, too." He knew it was true, but Mark had a choice. The box in his arms was evidence. Proof of the corruption at Ashbrook Correctional. Proof that murders had been covered up for decades. Proof that men in power had traded justice for silence. He walked away from the prison, Rook at his side, toward the dark road beyond the gates. Somewhere ahead was a phone, a reporter, someone who would listen. But Carter wasn't done. Later, when guards searched the kitchen, they found the broken floorboards and nothing else. No box, no hand, no evidence, just the smell of rust and damp concrete. Carter's shadow lingered there, and the whispers in Ashbrook never stopped. For quiet resolution. Weeks later, Mark sat alone in a small motel room miles from Ashbrook. The rain fell quietly outside. Rook laid his feet, silent now. The box rested unopened on the table beside him. He'd made his choice. He could release the evidence, expose the truth. But doing so would mean war, not just with Ashbrook, but with every shadowed corner of power that thrived on silence. Mark reached for the box, his hand hovering. He looked at Rook. The dog stared back, eyes steady. Mark closed the box instead. Some truths, he decided, carried too much weight, and some secrets were meant to stay buried. The rain slowed to a hush. Outside, the road lay dark, and Ashbrook waited.